Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Just waiting as people come in, but I think we've got the majority here now. So good morning. For those that don't know me, I'm Marcus Crudden, the Executive Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation at the Commission. I would like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands and waterways on which we work and live, and where you're coming and meeting with us today from. I acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and pay my respect to elders past and present. I recognise their value and the ongoing role they play in shaping and enriching the story of Victoria. Thank you for joining us today as we kick off the first of two workshops focused on effective and inclusive engagement. Today's focus is engaging with customers experiencing vulnerability, with presentations from a select group of water businesses for their outstanding work in this area during the last water price reviews. In 2 weeks' time, we'll also be having another workshop focused on engagement with First Nations people, where we hope to see you there as well, because there's some really outstanding examples of engagement within that work. So hopefully you can all join us for that as well. Today I'm joined by the Commission's water team, so many of such as Lucy, Christy, Peter, many you will know and have dealt with during the price review here. Also joined by our new chairperson, Gerard Brody. So Gerard's sitting in and observing today. Gerard was on the other side of the fence, and I know worked with some of you as a consumer rep and made submissions on the price review. So it's very valuable to have you here as well, Gerard. We've received over 100 registrations for today, so we welcome representatives from all the water businesses, consumer groups and the welfare sector, industry peak bodies, and we've also got some of our counterparts from interstate economic regulators, so obviously a topic and an area with a high degree of interest. Today we'll hear insights and lessons learned on how to develop sensitive and appropriate design of engagement activities, which really led to some quite meaningful and deep customer participation in the last water price reviews under our Primo framework. From the recent price reviews, we're pleased to continue to observe improvements in engagement processes in relation to customers experiencing vulnerability or something going in where we ask for an increased focus. Water businesses are placing greater consideration on interests of people experiencing vulnerability during the decision-making processes, and also adopting more inclusive and more sensitive approaches to engagement practices, which has resulted in increased participation by groups and a more diverse set of customers engaged in this review compared to previous. As a result, there have been some really big improvements in outcomes, some increased financial support and assistance for customers experiencing vulnerability, along with infrastructure and service upgrades such as additional billing cycles, digital metering and targeted measures to assist those struggling to pay their bills, which has perhaps even since the price review become a more significant issue with the continued economic pressure on customers. We really hope that the workshop today and in a fortnight's time will provide you with an opportunity to learn from different ways to consider and incorporate the needs of customers experiencing vulnerability into your regulatory planning and decision making. We really want these things by part of the price review, a part of your ongoing commitment to customers out there to understand what is going on and what your customers are experiencing. So we're generally excited to see how engagement is shaping up for this and for the next water price reviews in 2028. They come around surprisingly quick, don't they? I'll now hand over to Lucy Idle, our Manager of Customer and Engagement, to take you through today's workshop. But thank you again and welcome everybody. Over to you, Lucy.
Very much, Marcus. Many of you will know me. I'm Lucy Idle. I'm a project manager here at the Commission. I've been involved in price reviews for a period of time and certainly involved in the inception and the development of the engagement approaches over time. Great to see so many people here, and just I would like to add my acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the lands that we are all meeting and working on today, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and really acknowledge the connection that that Aboriginal people have had, First Nations people have had over a long period of time. Today we have pulled together an amazing number of people, so thank you very much for your participation today. We are really looking to look across the span of the contribution that water businesses have made in this area, looking at different ways to consider and incorporate the needs and experiences of consumers who are experiencing vulnerability, and how that's been incorporated into the regulatory programs and the decision making that's been going on over many, many years. Today, we've got 3 presenters who will be sharing their experiences in the lead up to the 2024 price review. We've asked them to present around 10 minutes on what they were able to develop over that time. We will then move to a Q&A panel discussion and invite questions from the panel to the panel members. While they're speaking, there is an opportunity to use the facility that we've got here with the Teams webinar. So there is a Q&A. There is also a chat function. The Q&A is the one that we invite you to use to post your questions as you're hearing from the presenters. If you open that up now, you'll see the opportunity up top to start a discussion or start a question. You can see some examples there where we've been playing around with that prior to the lead up to the session. So just feel free to post your questions or your discussion items in there. You can upvote other people's questions and discussions, and we will bring those into the panel discussion later in the session. At the moment, we have turned cameras and mics off, but as we go into the panel discussion, we'll be enabling that, and we'll also be then inviting you to turn on your microphone and on your camera to ask a question to the panel members. The event today is recorded. We do plan to upload that to our webpage so that we can share that and can be available to you and your colleagues over the future years and to support the sharing and learning that's going on today. I think that's it with the housekeeping. So I get the very good news of being able to introduce our first presenter. So I'm just we've got Amy Rouse from Coliban's customer care team. Amy is Coliban's customer care coordinator. I think one of the things, Amy, you've spent, so I think this is your first time presenting at a session like this to the water businesses. You've spent the past 12 years working in roles that directly support vulnerable Australians. You've managed hardship and resolution programs at Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, and you've played a key role in the operations and compliance at the Centre for Non-Violence, a local agency in the Coliban's area dedicated to combating family violence. So while at the Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, you contributed to important initiatives, including the Australian Banking Association's concept development for Way Forward Debt Relief. And you've also participated in Senate inquiries, including the inquiry into Buy Now, Pay Later schemes. You're based in Bendigo. Thank goodness it's online, so we've not needed to do the travel arrangements. You enjoy, we've asked something a little bit more personal about each of our presenters today to really help get to know the people who are sharing their lessons with you. So Amy, you enjoy running, you're watching your teenage son play soccer and piano and dreaming up new and indulgent recipes to spoil your friends with, especially cheesecake. Thank you very much for presenting today, and we'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Lucy, and welcome everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to share Coliban Water's insights around effective and inclusive engagement with customers experiencing vulnerability. I'm also really excited to hear from Adele and Liz. I think that this is not just a fantastic learning opportunity for attendees, but also participants and presenters. But I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm in Jara country, and I'd like to acknowledge the elders past and present and thank them for their care and custodianship of our waterways, lands and skies. So if we can move on to the first slide, I'm going to start the presentation just by introducing you to our region and our customers, to give you a picture of our customer base and the nuances that we needed to consider that may differ from what you need to consider with your customers. So our region encompasses the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung, the Tamarang and the Yorta Yorta peoples. We cover 16,500 square kilometres of land from Kahuna and Echuca in the north down to Denali, Guildford and Trentham in the south. We service approximately 177,000 customers. Water usage varies across our region from standard urban consumers to farmers, primary producers, commercial, industrial, so trade-based customers as well. Our average customer age is 48 and 30% of our customers have a concession card. So moving on to our first slide, like many of you here today, we engaged an independent party to facilitate our deliberative panel that would develop the key recommendations for our pricing submission. So I'm not going to deep dive into that. I've done some LinkedIn stalking and I can see that many organisations have already started that process. So I'm going to jump straight into the discussion around our engagement. And you'll see up on the screen that there is a statement there and it says, how does Coliban Water prepare for tomorrow while being fair to customers today? And that was the remit put to members of our deliberative panel that were working on the pricing submission with us. Our Coliban Assist program featured really heavily in our pricing submission as well as the deliberative panel discussions. And that was because we really needed to increase our prices to replace ageing and failing infrastructure so that we could deliver a quality service to our customers. Our customers and community acknowledge the need for spending in this area and the increased pricing to support this spend. But they also expected Coliban Water to ensure that vulnerable members of our community were supported and not left behind. So moving on to the next slide, you'll see a picture there of our letters of support. So our panel members were recruited by an independent party and we took an agnostic approach to recruiting those members. Coliban Water, although we engaged an independent third party, were able to ensure that the relationships we had with existing community members were brought in to the discussion, but we were also able to actively seek out new relationships, particularly with underrepresented groups. And a really good example of that is the City of Greater Bendigo's Youth Council. Youth are heavily impacted by the decisions we make today and are quite often left out of these discussions. So we wanted to ensure that they had a voice in our pricing submission and were able to provide their knowledge and insights and what was really important to them. So in terms of our engagement, once we had recruited these members, we took a really simple approach. When we were engaging with members of the community, we asked them how they wanted to be engaged. We didn't make assumptions around that engagement. We let them lead the way in terms of the engagement. So JARA, who are our traditional owner group and registered Aboriginal party here in Bendigo, for instance, they said that they wanted a really informal approach. They didn't want formal meetings. They didn't want any boardrooms. They wanted to chat over coffee. And hearing them and working on our engagement in a way that they wanted to be engaged was really helpful, and that has certainly came out through the engagement process and also in their letter of support after the engagement process. And I'll read you a statement from their letter of support that says, we acknowledge the strong relationships that Coliban Water have with traditional owner groups in our region and recognise the amount of engagement before and during this process has been effective and of quality. So by providing them with the opportunity to tell us how they wanted to be engaged, we were able to have really rich discussions with them. And that letter of support really reiterates that engagement worked. So in total, we received 9 letters of support, and the value of these letters really can't be understated or underestimated. Each letter we received, and you can access these letters through viewing our pricing submission. They tell a story about our engagement methods and what that engagement meant to the organisations that have written these letters. And we take enormous pride in the fact that 9 organisations took the time to write not only letters, but quite detailed letters that demonstrate the connection to community and reflect the unique contribution that each organisation has made to our pricing submission. These letters tell us that we're on the right track and provide insight to what these organisations expect from us over the coming 5 years. And this is particularly important when we consider how we deliver on the commitments and deliverables that that make up our pricing submission. So if we can move to the next slide, this brings us to our customer participation and how we're delivering on the outcomes and outputs that made up our pricing submission. So our first year has been really successful. Our customer care team has delivered in excess of $1 million worth of financial support directly to victim survivors of family violence, vulnerable customers and customers experiencing financial difficulty. Now, this $1 million was made up of $570,000 of customer support that's provided by Coliban Water, but also external grants such as utility relief grants and community rebates. We move on to the next slide. I'm going to do a bit of I say deep dive. In 10 minutes, we certainly can't do that, but a bit of an overview of the Coliban Assist program, which is that direct support mechanism for our vulnerable customers. So our Coliban Assist program is for customers with a concession entitlement or a Centrelink payment, and the program supports customers to clear debt that they may have accrued and become self-sustainable. There is also a focus in the program of educating customers around their usage so that they can take and retain a level of control around their bills. And we can see from the screen that early on, in the early days of the new pricing structure, customer participation sat at 193. And if we fast forward to the same time this year, we've got 246 customers participating in the program. And that tells us that the program is working. We're engaging with our customers. And that, we are growing in this area. But it also tells us that the strategies that were developed by our communications and engagement team and our customer care team are working as well. So to touch on 2 of the most valuable strategies that we've been able to enact this year and last year, a language strategy that was developed by our communications and engagement team. Now, this language strategy really changed the way we spoke with our vulnerable customers and customers experiencing hardship. So we stopped referring to our service offerings as hardship assistance or vulnerability grants. And instead, we used language like entitlements and customer benefits. And we did this to reduce stigma and make the program feel more accessible to our customers. Our second strategy was a direct and targeted campaign to engage customers, and it tied in the language strategy. What we did was a direct mail out to customers in plain envelopes, no Coliban Water branding on them, a script style font was used, and we identified customers that weren't receiving the benefits that they may have been entitled to. So customers with a valid concession who had debt and had not applied for a utility relief grant in the past 2 years were sent a letter saying, hey, you may be eligible for up to $650 off your bill. Contact us and we'll talk this through with you. We also targeted customers who own properties who may have had leaks to see if we could offer them assistance through our Plumber Assist program, which involves a water audit and up to $1,000 worth of essential repairs. And for customers with debt, we looked at trying to engage them to put them on a bill smoothing arrangement and help manage their water accounts in an easier way. And if we flip to our next slide, which talks about our hardship, our temporary hardship program, which is slightly different to our Coliban Assist program in that this works with customers who don't necessarily have the concessions or aren't receiving that Centrelink payment. It's for customers who have had a temporary change in their circumstances, so they may have lost their employment, had illness, a reduction in income, or increased expenses. And while we saw the participation in the Coliban Assist program really grow over the past 12 months, the same can't be said for this temporary hardship program. So this really demonstrates that in some ways we're getting it right, but in other ways we're having to look deeper into the work that we're doing because our engagement in the temporary hardship program has dropped off, which tells us that we need to better understand the needs of our customers in this area and develop a system that drives meaningful outcomes for them. So we're having to review our engagement in this area and try to connect with the people that can really tell us what we need to do here. I am going to skip over the next slide. That is utility relief grant approvals. So they have gone up, but we might move on just to the final slide. I'm just very aware of time here. And we'll talk about how we've continued to stay engaged with our customer base to ensure that our program continues to work and that the offerings we have are relevant and are on point for our customers. So what I can say here is that we are not taking a static approach. We continue to engage with our customer advisory groups, and our engagement with them is really rich, and their insights are quite incredible and thought-provoking. They've really helped drive the program in the right direction and course correct when we've needed to as well. So in addition to our customer advisory groups, we're also regularly seeking feedback from our customers and their representatives. We really utilise industry insights, particularly those from Thriving Communities Australia and Financial Counselling Victoria. And we remain active in our communities, so we participate and contribute to initiatives like our local community sector network meetings. And if anyone's interested in learning more about them, I'm happy to answer any questions offline. But essentially, the meetings were established by a local financial counsellor who was trying to break down the silos that exist within our local community sector. We're also attending expos and engaging with our community partners. But for our Coliban Assist program, we really feel that the success has been in the normalisation, demystifying and destigmatising of our services. And taking time to hear what our customers really want from us and not making those assumptions. And I really would encourage you in looking at your pricing submission for, the next pricing submission period to do this in your own unique and localised way, because all communities are different. But in leaving today, I wanted to read a quote from Rodney Carter from JARA. This has come from his letter of support that was added to our pricing submission. And I feel it tells a story about how we've worked with our customers and what is important to our community. So Rodney says, continue to support customers who need it and engage with them to identify and remove barriers to access and support. Invest in educating customers to manage their own accounts and usage. A significant step to building trust is to meet with them, so our customers, in place and develop trust with leadership groups of that community. And I think Rodney's really hit the nail on the head here, and it is something I know for our customer care team that we try to embody and follow in all the work that we do. So thank you. That's my presentation for today, and I hope it has been insightful. But certainly if you've got any questions about anything that I've discussed today, I'm more than happy to answer those questions, and also happy to receive your feedback as well. I think that that's really important as an industry. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. And really appreciate this is touching on the surface, and you've really been able to cover a range of different areas. The purpose of today is that there is a Q&A panel discussion for us, which will give us an opportunity to deeper dive into various elements of that, and obviously that offer to take up from many of the presenters to have that further discussion. For those who are joining live today, you'll see that in the Q&A we've already got a couple of questions. So we've got probably just one as a bit of a clarification, and I will just, if you could just check, that is the Plumber Assist program that you spoke about, Amy. Is that the same as the Community Rebate program?
It certainly is. Yes, again, this is customer feedback. We found that community rebate, our customers didn't understand what that meant. So we started terming it Plumber Assist. So we also partially fund Plumber Assist through our Coliban Assist budget, as well as that DECA funding.
I think this starts to touch on and open up that proactive communication and understanding customers' needs. So there's a couple of other questions that we'll come to later, and they may well be relevant as well, Liz and Adele, for your sessions around that communication approach. So we'll just park those a little bit there. So thanks very much, but do keep them coming. If there is a specific person that you would like to address those questions, and after the presentation sessions, do add that in as you're posting the question. Amy, really appreciate your starting off these sessions, and we will now move to Liz from South Gippsland Water. Liz Rowland, you're the General Manager of Customer Strategy and Technology at South Gippsland Water. You've got a background in corporate services in the water and local government sectors. So your current role, you oversee strategy, risk and transformation, communications and engagement, information technology and customer service. It's a lot, and it's not unusual for some of the smaller water businesses to have that multi-sector, and for your roles to span all of those areas. Really appreciate, again, as with Amy and as with Adele, your time today to help prepare for this work. You are leading the largest technology and ways of working transformation that South Gippsland Water has undergone. So outside of work, you love coaching basketballs, particularly young females, and your approach to that is empowering them through sport to be the best versions of themselves. And when not coaching, you're being a sports mum on the basketball and netball sidelines to two girls, and dabbling in new recipes for your friends and family. So thank you for taking this time aside to support the collaboration and capability building in this sector as well. Liz, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks for having me. And that was a great presentation, Amy. I know I was taking some notes and taking away some ideas for us for our next pricing submission. So I appreciate you having me here today and giving an overview of what we did through our 2023 pricing submission. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri. South Gippsland Water services the areas of the Gunno Kurnai and Bunurong peoples. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I recognise the long history of care that they have given to country and water. So I'll just give a quick overview of our engagement strategy for the 2023 price submission, which was we had a relatively short stint between price submissions, given that we did a 2020 price submission. So we had an engagement strategy in place for that, and we reviewed it for 2023. The approach that we took was to go broad first, understand whether we were meeting our obligations and whether we were recognising whether we were hitting what we had planned to hit, and we were getting the outcomes for our customers that we were wanting to through that 2020 price submission. The next part of it was to then go deep, so really engage with those customers that were at risk or vulnerable, and test whether we had the right supports in place, whether we were meeting those or whether we needed to develop those programs out and change them. Bartley Consulting was engaged for both of these engagements, so they partnered with us in both 2019 and 2022 to complete the engagement for South Gippsland Water. The first step that we took in this was just updating our view of vulnerability, and we were lucky that the ESC updated their paper in 2009, which was around getting to fair decision paper. Using that, we refined our language and reviewed our 2019 approach, and we updated our view of vulnerability using the 2021 census data. We recognised that we had to access our traditionally hard to reach cohorts, and we wanted to test the effectiveness of our existing customer support programs, the possible impacts of any price submission proposals, knowing that we were likely to be required to increase pricing. We then wanted to identify and test our proposed supports and really engage them at that involved level on the IAP2 spectrum. So making sure that we were those customers felt like they had a level of involvement in decision making and around how we set up the right support programs for them. So for us, that meant that we sent out invitations to engage with us. Our customer support team identified the customers and agencies that we wanted to target based on past interactions or recent involvements in the customer support programs. We contacted customers with instructions to reach out to Helen Bartley to participate if they would like. And we also tried to incentivise that with $50 gift card incentives. We also ensured that all feedback that was provided to us was anonymous. So really building that trust with those customers. We also wanted to help them feel that there was a level of anonymity with providing that feedback to us, which is why we decided to do it at arm's length, allowing our customers to be more open around their experiences with South Gippsland Water, but also in general with vulnerability. So we took a two-phase engagement program and we set that up. So the first phase of that was actually reaching out to 23 support agencies and interviewing them. We then had 22 customer interviews and a group interview, and that was really about giving some context and background, understanding our impacts on our customers, understanding how we could better support our customers in terms of paying those water bills, the price and service trade-off, so a little bit of education in terms of what it means for higher prices and what that would mean if we were to not increase them, and the service trade-offs that they may have to think about, and what those proposed price paths could look like. Through that, we then worked through what phase 2 of this engagement was then around reaching out to 9 support agencies, including 2 from the first phase, and 8 customer interviews. And this was really around then the topics were the programs that we were developing up for support. So making sure that we were giving them feedback around what did it look like. So how did we hear them in that first phase of engagement, and what did that look like? What did we convert that to when we talked about how those support programs might work? So that was around co-payment programs and debt collection management processes, any other community rebate programs that we put in place, community grants, and that price path. So whether that price, how high could we go on that price path? Through our Go Broad phase, we did identify that small businesses were actually doing it hard from COVID and through other impacts to them around the economy. So we set up a third group around those small business advocates. So we spoke to 8 small business advocates and 6 small business owners and customers to really identify what would support them. So how would they need additional support as well as we rolled out these customer support programs. For us, we wanted to test what programs might work for those. So that was one, the ability for them to be included in our customer support programs, but also no interest on outstanding balances, extended repayment plans. So the sorts of supports that were more dedicated to business rather than residential. We had meaningful conversations with target customer groups. So we knew that our vulnerable and at-risk customers were the ones that we really needed to reach out to. We had 77 in-depth interviews. We conducted in-person, online and phone interviews. Each interview ranged from 30 minutes to an hour. And it was really a deliberative engagement. So it was trying to make sure that we heard from all customer cohorts across our customer base. What we found is that we did really reach out. We spoke to those with that had been survivors of family family violence. Spoke to those with that were in financial hardship and low income, those with disabilities or were aged, those on pensioner healthcare or healthcare cards, and struggling small business owners. Migrant and refugees was quite a big, large group. Was a great group that we spoke to, where we got quite a lot of insights, and also renters and the difference between renters and mortgages. So those that were homeowners compared to those that were tenants and renting. We would have liked more direct engagement with our Indigenous customers that were experiencing vulnerability. Unfortunately, we couldn't recruit any of those customers directly, and there weren't any local agencies who focus on our Indigenous people. So the ones that do were based outside of South Gippsland and were already engaging with their local water corporations. So for us, that was a gap that we probably want to close in our next pricing submission, that we felt we didn't quite get to that cohort of group of people. After speaking to those customers, they made it really clear to us that for them, the community support was really important. So we came up with a new guaranteed service level community grant, which was a $10,000 community resilience grant for each boiled water advisory that came out, and it is designed to support vulnerable cohorts. So the grant is set up to be awarded to those that are actually looking to put in programs to support our vulnerable customers. We developed a new co-payment program. So that's for every 3 payments made, we contribute the value of the 4th, and that is open to our small business customers as well. We kept our revenue, so we actually took a revenue gap into our pricing path, so we didn't increase our prices to the ability that we had to under the pricing model. So we do have a revenue gap that we will try to close over this price period, but that was to recognise that our customers couldn't afford the increase that we needed to for our costs. Our customers said that they wanted a smooth price path, so we ensured that we made sure there was no step changes in prices, so any price increases are on a smooth path and manageable for our customers. And we've increased over this year in particular, we've increased our support in our customer support team. So we've employed a new staff member to help process and apply for utility relief grants for our customers. We know that's the largest support that's sort of accessed through the South Gippsland area. And in 23-24 financial year alone, we've got over 400 customers supporting accessing those utility relief grants. For us, we do a facilitated support in that space. So our customer care team actually provides quite a hands-on service to help customers fill out those utility relief grant applications, just because they're a little bit more complex. And when our customers are in those hard times, they find those sorts of things stressful. So it was about how do we provide that additional support to them to make those financial supports available. We feel like our factors of success in this was that we had clear engagement objectives right from the outset, and that fed into the design of our programs in terms of in the stages to test and then retest. It also allowed us to adjust as we went through as we took our customers through the engagement, and that's how we added small business into it. We built on our existing relationships, and that gave us the ability to take our discussions to the next steps. So as Amy said, a lot of our engagements, when they were in person, were over coffee and cake. So a lot of those were actually in coffee shops, giving the people to meet where they felt most comfortable. We also did them online and over the phone for those that couldn't get access to transport or couldn't meet us outside of their home, so where they felt safe to provide that feedback in their home. Originally, it was through the Bartley Group, but we brought in our South Gippsland Water people to build out those trust relationships. So it made sure that we were building those relationships to continue for them to be ongoing. Where possible, we did attend the group and agency interviews, and a local community house connected us to the women's group for recent immigrants. So that was one where we actually gained a lot of information from that group, and it was great we had really insightful conversations with the recent immigrants group. So as I said, lots of coffee catch-ups in neutral spaces that worked for the in-person interviews. phone and online interviews worked for agency and customers that were isolated. We were really keen on building the trust and making sure that we were listening and that our customers understood that their feedback was taken in a non-judgmental manner. So making sure our customers felt valued and listened and acknowledged through that process. Our reflections on it for us really is, how do we maintain an ongoing conversation outside of pricing submission engagements? We have a community advisory committee, and our question for us that we're asking right now is, do they actually represent some of those vulnerable customers? So have we got that right in our community advisory committee, or do we need to look at how we broaden that out? Also, how do we keep the coffee catch-ups going? So how do we have them on a more regular basis? The other part for us is, anecdotally, we know many of our vulnerable customers are not seeking our assistance. So while we have around 500 in hardship and we've got 18 that have actually accessed our co-payment program, anecdotally, we know that there is a lot more that are experiencing vulnerability in our region. We do have a very high level of vulnerability within the South Gippsland region. So for us, we're now asking, how do we make it as safe and as easy as possible for those who need our help to access it? So come and talk to us, and for us to continue to build up those supports.
Thank you so much, Liz. There is a question that we'll come to. Barbara's put in the post, so if you want to just check that in the space while Adele's speaking. But really appreciate, you've covered a lot of ground there. So do put your questions in the chat if there are particular elements that you'd like Liz to come back to in relation to that. But yeah, thank you very much for that overview and hearing that approach, which is, some similarities that I'm picking up, but also some differences to Coliban Water. And I think one of the themes that you're touching on is that those anticipated price increases and how that went into the planning process. And I know that was also a factor in Coliban Water's planning as well at the outset, that there was a high likelihood that to happen. So really interesting to hear how that it started informing at the early stage. And yeah, but we'll come back to that. I think there might be some other questions around that later in the session. For now, we will pass to the next esteemable speakers, Adele from Grampians Wimmera Mallee Water. Adele, you're the Executive Manager of Customer and Employee Experience, and you have been with Grampians since 2019. You've got a background in communications and marketing for the community community service sector, which you've been able to bring to the role. You oversee communications and engagement, people and culture, and customer service. Again, a very broad remit there at your water business. You love pushing teams to try new things, and clearly that's been evident in your work. Outside of this, you are known to be dabbling in trampolining, pole vaulting, and diving, so lots of high stuff there, but also the roller derby, which I would love to hear more about. And that seems to be preparing you well for your very active new toddler who's on board. So again, thank you for your time coming to present here today.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me, Lucy, and for inviting me to present today. Bear with me. I know there's been a lot of information thrown at you. I like to think maybe I've interpreted the brief a little bit differently potentially. So bear with me. So I'm joining you from the lands of the Watchabalik people. And just if you flick to the first slide, Christy, just to give you some context of Victoria's water authorities, we have the largest geographical footprint with an operational area the size of Tasmania. So that includes 13 local government areas, 60,000 square kilometres, but only 72,000 customers. So as you can imagine, spreading costs across such a small customer base presents challenges. But it's also challenging in terms of our ability to offer equitable access and opportunity to give feedback and to engage with the customers and stakeholders across such a vast area. Flick to the next one. This is a very busy slide, but and you're probably not going to be able to see the detail that is in our price submission. I suppose what this captures, though, is really a 5 years worth of engagement. So the focus of our engagement ahead of the most recent price submission was on elevating our approach, which was assessed as leading in 2018. So it was, what can we do better? It's underpinned by the IAP2 model of engagement, but the key principles of this model are that engagement is a continuous feedback loop. So activities start just months following the submission of our 2018 to 2023 price review. It includes a combination of targeted and broad engagement activity, depending on our ability to influence and potential for customer cost impact. So the data gathered from each engagement activity feeds into the next. And there's regular exposure throughout to our board. So they're getting that feedback throughout, continuously throughout the 5-year period. And then the process culminates in a community panel, which considers all the previous insights we've gained over the years to make recommendations on our price submission proposals. So in terms of our community panel, so between March and August 2022, a community panel comprising of 16 customers that reflected our customer base convened to provide recommendations to our board on a series of proposals presented. The panel was chaired by an independent chairperson, and I've just noted that that was a paid role, and was supported by a consultancy to ensure the process was transparent and robust. Proposals were supported with data and insights from previous engagements to provide an evidence base for the panel to consider as part of their deliberations. So they were very much coming from, an educated perspective, an informed perspective. We used a similar model in the preparation of our 2018-2023 price submission, but we're enhancing the process and effective this time around by recruiting participants to ensure the panel reflected and incorporated voices that reflected all different customers, people who had experienced vulnerability, as well as First Nations representation. And that just meant that we were less reliant on speaking to representative groups on behalf of customers. We also enabled the use of hybrid meetings, which I'll touch on a little bit more later, and that increased both the inclusiveness and the accessibility to customers who are spread across such a vast geographic area that I referred to earlier. And then I suppose it was around ensuring that the proposals that we were presenting to the panel, they really did have an ability to influence the outcome and where there was going to be the most significant impact on customer prices or value. In terms of the representation on the panel, we had a 50-50 split of men and women, mix of property owners and tenants, ages ranging from young people in their 20s to those in their 70s, individuals, couples, families and dependent children. But yeah, I suppose what I would highlight, these people, don't necessarily just represent one cohort. They were also there speaking on behalf of their CFA or their rec reserve that they're involved with, the sporting clubs that they're a member of. And then also the 6 participants who identified as having experienced vulnerabilities. So that included fixed incomes, customers who have been impacted by natural disasters, physical and mental health issues, disability and general financial hardship. And I suppose that was much about recognising the fact that, although we did we did very much a targeted approach in terms of recruitment to ensure we had that representation, that actually many of our customers have experienced some form of vulnerability, and it's not necessarily how they see themselves, but we actually surveyed everyone that was on our panel and asked questions about their life experiences, which would indicate they had lived experience, even though they don't necessarily consider themselves vulnerable. So that was just an interesting takeaway, because there was probably a bigger mix of vulnerability represented on the panel than we even realised at the start. So I'll touch on our hybrid engagement model. So the coronavirus pandemic, while disruptive, provided an opportunity for us to reconsider our approach and innovate to ensure our engagement processes were not compromised. So actually our ability to pivot to a hybrid virtual and in-person delivery of engagement activities enhanced the accessibility and depth of our engagement by enabling participation across our substantial geographic footprint, as well as incorporating the use of interactive digital tools to gather both quantitative and qualitative data. Given we are a relatively small water corporation in terms of customers, we had little to no budget for any external resources to be able to deliver this. So there was no contractors involved. We used existing technology and it evolved through a continuous improvement process for subsequent events. So very much trial and error. I remember after our first hybrid workshop, my boss said to me, "Oh, well, we'll never do that again." So I suppose what I would say is perseverance is key. And you can only get better and learn from those experiences as you go. So we had a team, as it was basically our communications and engagement team, that were assisting to facilitate engagement sessions. And we were using breakout rooms, polls, ranking and voting, which could be accessed by all attendees through QR codes or links from their devices. But conversely, we did have people in the room that preferred paper submissions. So, the butcher's paper still got to go in our engagement processes. So this approach was developed in the early stages in preparation for our prize submission, but it became a key feature of our community panel facilitation in the finalisation of the submission. So it allowed a diverse range of customers to be involved and allowed flexibility for all participants, no matter where they were located geographically, or for those with disabilities and caring responsibilities equally, to participate. We had one customer who is based in Ultima, which is quite close to Swan Hill, so a 2-hour drive from our head office in Horsham, who didn't have a driver's license at the time. So her participation in previous engagements just would not have been possible. So it was really good to I suppose, hear that anecdote and persevere with that. I did also share a link. I think the next slide is actually, it's just a screenshot at the moment, but we did prepare and were finalist in the AWA Awards for our hybrid engagement model. So that video is available and I'm happy to share that link separately if people are interested in, I suppose, some of the detail that sat behind that. But yeah, overall, I suppose, one of the key messages that came through from our community panel was really around wanting to keep everything affordable in the context of rising costs. And I think that that advice and that input has really been instrumental in how our price submission was formed. So engagement is very much part of our DNA here, and yeah, we're already working on the next one. So thanks, Lucy.
Thank you. And again, really great to be reminded of the breadth and coverage that you needed to get across, each time you go for this with this work. So thank you very much, Adele. So that's with our presentation. So at this point, we're going to move to a panel discussion. So Amy, Liz and Adele will now be responding to some questions or queries that you've got relating to any part of what you've just heard, but also if you'd like to explore some other areas. So you can put questions in the Q&A. We've already got a few in there, which we will come to shortly. Your question can be for all of the presenters. It can be for specific presenters. If there is a particular person you'd like to respond, please note their name in the session. Marcus, while we haven't formally prepared, we may draw on you to also, if there's any particular questions for the Commission, that's also an opportunity here. I would like to start off. So what we are now doing is enabling both your camera and your microphone. So that means that if you do have a particular question in there, I can invite you to speak directly to the presenters if you want to give a bit more context or add meaning to your question. But I would like to kick things off with a question to all panel members. And you touched on this, Adele, around how COVID informed your approach to the work, and that was absolutely true for everybody who was embarking on that price submissions for 2023. So something that I'd like to touch on, I guess, since that time, we have become so much more aware of the changes in the economic environment since COVID. So my question to all panel members is, how have the current economic conditions made it tougher in your communities, and how are you thinking of taking that into account in your current and future engagement? Maybe Adele, if you want to start off there, and maybe if we can move the slides. I've just got some slides visible on my screen. I'm not sure if others do, that we might pop them down.
So I suppose my initial reaction to that, Lucy, is, we really, our community panel and our engagement process certainly said that they wanted us to sort of, I suppose, improve our, how much we were supporting our community, get out there a bit more, provide support to more people. But on reflection, I suppose what has occurred, and we are really noticing an increase in our call volumes as bills land. We're having more people actively reach out to support for us. So despite the fact we had some really good intentions on being more proactive in that space and reaching more people, the impact has more been that, we're actually getting more people coming to us directly and seeking those payment plans. And then, as we're having those discussions, talking to them about what other things might be available to them. So we haven't necessarily had to be as proactive in that space as we needed to be. We're having people come to us. So I think that's only going to continue. But I suppose it's just about, making sure that we're establishing a really good relationship. They know who their contact is in our customer support team. And they know what other supports that we have available that they might be eligible for and can access.
Yeah, thank you. Liz, what are you noticing around your current engagement or engagement plans because of the climate, the economic conditions?
Yeah, similar to Adele, we've certainly felt that increase in terms of customers reaching out for support, and we have seen our number of customers in hardship increase quite significantly this year. We are taking, so I guess we're probably, because we're in the transformation phase at the moment, we're reaching out to our customers in terms of how they want to engage with us, and we did that in our latest customer survey, so that customers have got more choice in terms of how we engage. So we're just right in the middle of setting up a new portal and new ways for them to do that. So if they don't feel comfortable calling us, they've got the ability to reach out online or in other methods, which is not available to them right now. So we're shifting our engagement in terms of trying to really reach out to the customers in terms of what would support them best. So giving them more choice and more ability to reach us in any way possible. Once we've, as Adele said, once we're starting the conversation, it gives us the ability to really work through every assistance program that we've got there for them. But we're also reviewing our programs and seeing if are they working, are they doing what we need them to work? Are they meeting the needs that we think they should be meeting? And if not, how do we adjust them through the next couple of years?
And Amy, what are you noticing about the approach that the business is taking because of the changes in customer circumstances?
Well, I think there's a common theme here, and I do mirror what Adele and Liz have shared today. For Coliban Water, we had a really strong Coliban Assist program that focused on concession customers, but what we're seeing now is that, just because you're not in receipt of a concession doesn't mean that you're not doing it tough. We've got a cost of living crisis. And for us, our customers are telling us that we've got a really great relationship with many of our customers, and they're really open and honest with us, as are members of the community. and the community sector in sharing, what's going on for our customers. A lot of the time too, the customers are actually coming to us with the solutions as well. So what we're trying to do is be really open and adaptive when they're telling us what they need. So not waiting to implement a strategy around it, but really looking at, how can we act on this feedback immediately with the customers so that we can drive change immediately. And I think it's our Coliban's ability to flex and listen to our customers that has been really helpful. But there certainly has been a shift away from that, fixed payment, Centrelink concession to I'm working full time, I just can't make ends meet. And that's where we're really having to do some work at the moment. It's not just the customers telling us that. You saw from the slide pack today that the data is telling us that as well. So, that's really the insight that I can provide. And it's a piece of work, a work in progress for us at the moment. But so long as we can keep those communication channels open and look at different ways to engage those customers, I think that's where we're going to see change.
You've all touched on communication and changing the way that you're communicating and having to think more proactively and creative about that. One of the questions that's come, and this was Morris, thank you for posting this in the chat, and it was actually during your presentation, Amy, and you spoke about some of the neutral branding and that the people, and Adele, you touched on it as well, people not identifying as hardship or vulnerable customers, but certainly having the traits or experiences that would make them more vulnerable to a difficulty in life and accessing the services. But how, so I guess in terms of the neutral branding and those proactive arrangements and things where you're trying to communicate people's eligibility, how do you avoid that? In this case, how do you avoid recipients thinking that it's a scam? Amy, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. And look, when I spoke about the neutral branding on the envelopes, as soon as the customers opened that envelope, providing they did, they could very clearly see that it was a Coliban Water letter. We provided phone numbers on that letter rather than links to websites and forms. So we did take, perhaps not, a 21st century approach. We took a step back to, really engage with customers through written word. But beyond that too, we're really utilising the relationships that we're building in the community. What we've found, and again, particularly our communications and engagement team are very active in the community, and we acknowledge that one person, as Adele and Liz called out, they're not simply a member of Probus or a vulnerable customer. They wear many hats, and people have got this wonderful, human nature is to try to connect. So when we have, we're meeting with somebody from a community group and they say, hey, I'm also a part of this, we take that opportunity. And for us, that's led to things like engaging with Bendigo Community Health, who have a settlement program for refugees that had been a missing area and a missing group for us. So we're just taking every opportunity that we possibly can to engage in that area. I hope that's answered the question. I too tend to go off on tangents, sorry.
Liz and Adele, have you noticed any overlap there in terms of identifying your organisation, the trust, and that, I guess, that scepticism about scams and how to engage people with your services?
Yeah, we I guess pretty similar. We recently sent out a customer survey and we didn't put any branding on it, and the impact to us was that we didn't get the numbers that we were hoping to get fill out that survey. So there's certainly awareness in the scam space and people being more kind of critical or more wary around opening those sorts of things. So we are thinking about how do we actually land our brand a little bit better. So how do we actually make our brand probably more prominent rather than less prominent? But same as what Amy was just saying, we use our customer connection, we use our community connections really through our staff. That's a big part of what we do. We are part of the community, so our staff they live and breathe and work in South Gippsland. So we do use that to reach out, and we use that to create that trust, particularly through those agency and the existing relationships that we've got.
Sounds like we should swap some notes, Liz, because similar situation for us out here. We're going through the process now, and we're doing some digital transformation more for our customer facing channels, and one of the things front of mind for me is building that level of brand awareness and trust, that no matter which channel or how you're engaging with us, that it looks and feels and sounds the same, to sort of build that confidence and awareness that that email is from us, it is a legitimate email, that text message is from us. We'll be embarking on I suppose a bit of a brand refresh of sorts. I suppose we've got I wouldn't say it's a unique challenge, but the abbreviations that come with being GWM Water, when there's a GWW Water, a GMW, there is a GVW, that real lack of connection to place. And so, when do we start using our whole name, and that connection to us as a community? But also, we've been heavily reliant on a phone survey that happens every 2 years. It's a real person rather than it being a robo survey. But over the past several years, it's been getting harder and harder to get those responses. And, I know myself, I'm not likely to pick up a strange number that calls me at an evening, because I think it'll be a telemarketer. So we're really having to think about a multi-channel approach to getting that feedback. But with that, there needs to be some consistency in language and branding.
So I'll open this next question up, and it touches on the work that you've all talked about in identifying the different types of vulnerability. Liz, you talked about being informed by, I guess, our strategy document around vulnerability and the barriers that people experience accessing services, whether that be market, whether that be event-based. There are a whole lot of things that can create vulnerability. They're not just inherent in an individual person. You talked about the work in identifying that in your communities. Adele, you touched on temporary hardship as being something that had emerged and sounds like something that was a little bit new. I'm going to ask you each about that engagement and that identification of vulnerability. What did you learn, and what were the particular groups that emerged out of that investigation and inquiry that you did? And perhaps your case, Amy, I think the question is around the temporary program. What did that look like, and what did it mean? The temporary hardship program.
I think are you happy for me to start? Yeah. So our temporary hardship and our Coliban Assist program, there aren't time limits on it, but we do aim in that temporary hardship space to get customers back on track sort of within 12 months after they've resolved their temporary hardship. We know that it's not an instant, you don't find work and then you're back on track. If you've spent 3 months out of the workforce, you've got an accumulation of debt that you need to address. So we try to work at an individual level and let the customer own their own solutions. It's not uncommon for a customer not to identify with being vulnerable. No one wants to be vulnerable. We want to be empowered in the work that we do and the agency that we hold over ourselves. So, it's very much about hearing what the customer needs and working with them on their timeline, but being really clear on what the objectives are as well in that work that we're doing with them, and how we can support as well.
So, Liz and Adele, were there customer needs that emerged out of that engagement, and what was the tactic or the activity you put in place to help address that?
I think probably a key reflection from the engagement is just the need to be flexible and adaptive and respond in a way that's meaningful at the time. And so I suppose I would reflect on, we had a quite significant bushfire in our region in February this year. The town of Pomona was 50, I think it was about 50% of the properties there wiped out, all in a day. And, you know, I suppose in our response to that, and we actually reached out to Coliban to talk to them about how they responded following the floods in Rochester. And so we tailored a response based on that, and just in conversation with the community on the ground, what did they need now? What did they, you know, what was going to support them the most? So that ability to be the agile, you know, and you know what came out probably, and you know, we did apply some fairly significant rebates in terms of any property that was lost. We basically said that they wouldn't have to pay any service charges for a 12-month period. But then we were also, because we've got digital meters installed at all of these properties, we were actually able to look at the days around the fire event, both, you know, immediately before and immediately after, and we could rebate the water use that they had used to defend their properties as well. So being able to really narrow that down and say, you know, we acknowledge that, you know, you were using this water to defend your property or clean your property afterwards. And then basically, you know, customer by customer, the amount of rebate they received would be different, but it was unique to their specific circumstances.
Incredibly powerful example there, Adele. Thank you. Liz, what bubbled up out of your engagement and the activities that?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we probably saw through COVID was a changing demographic as well. So I think that was probably something that we needed to recognise, that we've often had a transient demographic for us. We're on the coastal area, so lots of holiday houses, but we are seeing that shift, and we've had a much older age cohort, and I guess we're seeing that change with changes of life. So that our demographic is changing, which for us, when we're using older data that informs that view of vulnerability and where it's at, I think we are seeing that shift. And as Amy indicated before, it's not so much those that are concession holders or healthcare card holders, because we know about those, but it's more around, you know, the young families where they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and what supports they need. So I think that was probably some of the stuff that came through, particularly with our agencies, and how we start to shift and change the supports for that changing need. So I think we're seeing this become more dynamic than what we have previously. So that's just a challenge for us of how do we make that engagement more dynamic.
Marcus, you've sort of been very interested in the changing dynamic and the changing conditions between past and present. Is there something, questions for our panellists?
Look, I guess today in the changing circumstances and more the community struggling, and perhaps to Amy first, but it's probably relevant to Adele and Liz, because and I know today we've got about 10 reps from the local government sector as well. And I guess we know if people aren't paying their water bills or struggling to pay, it's likely they may have difficulty with council rates and energy bills and are possibly experiencing mortgage stress. I know, Adele, Amy, I know you're part of the One-Story Hub. I'm just interested what work businesses might be doing. There's sort of cross-sector referrals, whether through the hub, whether Adele or Liz, in your areas, are you kind of trying to work with things like local government, the power and energy companies, just to kind of say, well, we've identified this person, you know, how do we avoid people repeating stories, and also perhaps try and make sure we're doing that more holistic assistance with the financial counselling community. So perhaps, Amy, given you're in the hub, you might want to touch on that, but I'd be interested, Adele and Liz, what you might be doing as, you know, regional authorities, how you interact with other agencies and other parts of government in your area to help people.
Thanks, Marcus. So yes, we are involved in the One Stop, One Story hub through Thriving Communities Australia, and that has been really helpful in being able to connect our customers. You know, it really is that they tell their story once and they're able to access hardship and assistance through multiple organisations. But there is a real absence of local government in that hub, and where we've found value is in our local community sector network meetings that I touched on in our presentation. So they were developed by a local financial counsellor, and we do have representation from local government in those meetings. Confidentiality is obviously a big thing, so we can't simply ring up the City of Greater Bendigo and say, hey, is this person paying their rates? But we can speak quite generally around the challenges that we're facing, and also share the assistance. So when we're talking with the customer, we can say to them to call City of Greater Bendigo and speak with Katie, who works in the rates department. She'll be able to help you and offer assistance. So it's about creating familiarity with our customers and being able to do that warm handover to different areas that can support them. But if I can say, if you're from local government, really consider getting in contact with Thriving Communities and looking at that hub. It certainly provides a lot of value for us as an organisation, but even more value for our customers. And it's just a fantastic initiative, and we're really grateful to be part of that.
I'll go, Liz.
Jump in, Adele.
Yeah, look, we're part of a local forum called All Right Doors, and I suppose what that means is that there's no wrong door. No matter which one of us you approach that's part of that forum, we will send you in the right direction. So you might be telling your story here to us, but yeah, as Amy said, I think, offering that warm referral, letting them know that support is available, just being aware of what is available to them in other places as well is really powerful. We've also got really strong relationships with local rural financial counsellors, and have facilitated support for customers directly through them rather than us dealing with them. And we've had some really amazing feedback throughout that process. So I think, you really can't underestimate those networks and, maintaining those relationships and understanding of what else is out there beyond what we can offer.
Yeah, we're investigating the one-stop hub at the moment with Thriving Communities, so that's something we definitely want to look at. We have a close relationship with council, so we meet with them quite regularly. We've got 3 council areas that we cover, but South Gippsland Shire is our main crossover area, so we do have a really close working relationship with them, and this is one of the topics that we talk about quarterly in terms of how do we build those relationships out. Again, understanding that there's confidentiality around the data, so we're trying to work through what trends we're seeing and then how do we help customers. We do offer warm referrals, so very similar to you, Amy, in terms of we do offer those warm referrals to our customers, and we're often the recipient of those referrals as well. So we're finding that we're often not the first stop. We're probably the last stop, so we're probably the bill that customers are happy to pay last. So that's probably just the other reflection for us, is that we're often not the first stop in those when they're ringing to see what they can have assistance with.
So there's another question from Angus in the chat, and this is really around the impact of when those programs are being successful. How are you managing leak rebate budgets and hardship budgets generally? Angus is saying that this looks like it's going to be exhausted 6 months early. How does that? What's the flow-on effect, and how are you managing this?
Look, for Coliban, I've got to say, spending our budget was one of our biggest challenges, and it wasn't until the 2023-2024 financial year that we actually were able to spend that budget in its entirety. So we've I don't know whether to say we've been fortunate or not in the fact that we haven't had to really monitor the budget closely in terms of overspend, but really look at ways to get that money out the door. But what we have done this year is put some really loose sort of targets around the different areas so that we can monitor things like payment matching. How much are we putting out in payment matching? How much is going out in our plumber assist or community rebates program? How much are we waiving? How much debt are we waiving each year as well, or do we aim to waive each year? So as our customer engagement grows, as we have more customers entering the program, it's going to be something that we need to look at more closely and really tighten up. But just having a bit of an understanding of what we did last year and what we expect to do this year at the start of each financial year helps us stay on track in that area and adapt as well. So if we need to pull a bit of money from one area and put it across to the others, because that's what the customers are accessing, that's what we want to do.
And there is a particular question around the community grants, Liz, which I will pass to you shortly. But before I do so, Adele or Liz, did you want to add anything to that in response to that particular challenge?
No, look, I think we're probably in the same boat as Amy in that, you know, I suppose in recent times it's more about having the resources to actually, you know, proactively get out there and get that budget out into the community. That's probably been more of our limitation rather than having enough to distribute. It's more around having the people to do it for us.
I think from our point, we haven't seen it change a lot, but we do as it's more proactive, I guess it's more of our staff actually ringing our customers when they notice increased water bills, and we're getting out to them and saying we think you may have an undetected leak. But we do see it as our key grant to avoid us tipping our customers into hardship. So our budget hasn't changed a lot over the year, but the spend hasn't either, I guess. So that's probably a benefit to us, I guess. It's been easy to manage.
Okay. And in terms of the community grant scheme, Liz, there's a question from Barbara in there in response to that scheme. Has response to the scheme been positive? Yep.
Yeah, so the response has been really positive because it's opening it up to more than just water. So the guidelines for our grant is that it supports vulnerable customer cohorts and improves community resilience to face emergency or incidents, because we see that's where the boil water notices or advisory notices often come from. It has to go to a not-for-profit or a community group located within the local community, and it has to provide a benefit to those customers. We've had 3, so we've had 2 given out, 3, we're in the middle of a 3rd one right now. Our first one was in our Inverloch area, and we actually had 2 really great, we had a few people put in for it, but 2 really great standout applications. One was for beach access matting and purchase of a beach wheelchair by Bass Coast Disabled Surfers Association. So that had a really positive outcome. And our Inverloch Football Club, Netball Club, asked for funding to do LGBTQI training, which was again another outcome that we thought would support a vulnerable cohort. Our second one was our Poowong Loch Nyora area, where we had a boiled water advisory earlier this year. That grant was actually given to the Poowong local primary school to put a generator onto their toilet block, so that they could still access school when they had power outages. That area is prone to power outages quite often. And we know that school is often a safe place, sometimes the only safe place for children, and for some of those children in that area. So whatever we could do to enable them to continue to go to school, we thought was a great outcome. So we had some really great applications. But I guess for us, our managing director said it's probably the most he's ever felt connected to our community and reaching an outcome that really does change lives. So we had parents and teachers in tears as we were handing over that grant. So we're finding it's actually getting really great benefits, and the community are loving the fact that we're actually acknowledging when we don't meet that guaranteed service level, and that we're reaching out in some other way rather than to individual customers.
Thank you. For our final question, Jared, thanks for putting that in the post. I might just invite you to turn your camera on and mic on and maybe put this question to our panellists, and this will be the final comments from you each there if you want to. Jared, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Lucy, and thank you to Adele, Amy, and Liz for the really insightful presentations. I've really enjoyed it today. And it really picks up on that, I guess, a little bit of that point that you were making, Liz, about your managing director's involvement. I'm really interested in how panelists engaged organisational leadership and getting support for some of the measures you're putting in place. We generally know that leadership should come from the top, so I'm curious about how your CEOs and executive are accountable for good outcomes for vulnerable customers.
I'm happy to jump in. I've got my microphone first. Great question, Jared. We actually think leadership starts at our board. So it's the board actually getting support for that first of all, and then the MD and exec. We regularly report to one of our board committees on our vulnerable customers and how we're supporting them, and they are absolutely on board with making sure that we are meeting their needs, even to the point that we're having discussions around the balance between debt collection and hardship, and then how do we recognise that those that are in debt may be in hardship and not telling us. So how do we work around that? So at the end of the day, our customer outcomes are what we're here for. So that is through our vision and our strategy. It's through all of our work that we do. So customer being centric to the outcomes that we get, and particularly supporting those vulnerable customers, is almost in our DNA. So we don't have a lot of issues getting them accountable for that, because we understand that that's one of the main reasons we're here.
And Adele?
Yeah, I suppose I just mirror that a little bit. You know, our mission statement is that, you know, we want a thriving community, and so and that's everyone. So I think that is fundamental, and, you know, is led by our board and executive. But I suppose one of the connections that we've probably made, you know, and even the ESC customer perception surveys, you know, over the years, we haven't necessarily been ranked in the presentation of that where we would like to be. So we've spent a lot of time trying to understand what the drivers behind that, and you know, delving into any opportunities around customer research. And, you know, I think, you know, there's been this link connected to, you know, people's awareness of our customer support programs and what we have in place, what we're doing for our community, and their trust and their satisfaction in us as a water service provider. So I think, you know, despite the fact that I think there is really, you know, there's very good intentions, that's been probably a powerful tool in that, you know, investment in this space, you know, will hopefully, you know, support us in terms of our, you know, our satisfaction with our customers as well.
Amy.
Thank you. Well, what I would say for our organisation is that it hasn't been hard for me to sell our program to our managing director. In fact, he's coming to us. He's quite often at my desk saying, Amy, what are we doing to stop these customers falling off the cliff? I don't want you at the bottom of the cliff. I want you at the top, stopping it from happening. And that is really evident. You know, he really values, as does our executive Lauren, the work that we do. And as they're regularly at our desks asking us questions about what are we hearing from our customers. So, you know, as a leader in an organisation, it's really wonderful that I don't have to convince our board and our executive team of the value of the work that we do. And I think that it's so long as we continue to be demonstrating our, you know, our desire and our, you know, our real love of engaging with these customers and getting the right outcomes, we're going to stay front of mind with our executive team. And but it's certainly, you know, they're the ones asking the questions, they're the ones engaging us. There hasn't been a need from my, you know, from where I sit to really convince them of the importance. They understand it, and I just feed into that.
On behalf of the Commission, Chairperson Jared, Executive Director Marcus, and all of the team, I want to thank you, Adele, Amy and Liz, for those incredible presentations. So rich in insights. Thank you for that time preparing. The aim of the session was to really improve meaningful customer participation in the planning and price setting processes, but you've really shed a lot of light on the meaningful outcomes that are critical to our communities. So thank you so much. Obviously, clear themes around identifying with fresh eyes what vulnerability looks like, being customer-led, you all spoke about that. The power of long-standing relationships and thinking around the application of your current resources. You know, clearly that there's benefits in customer support, in the tailored proactive communication, and we heard a lot around the infrastructure and service improvements and that connection to community and trust. So thank you all very, very much. There is another session coming up in 2 weeks' time with a focus on First Nations engagement. We will be hearing from Yarra Valley Water, Gippsland Water, Bowen Water and Wannon Water. So I'm really looking forward to that. Representatives from the Commission, Jared and Marcus, will be also joining that. In the chat, you'll see a survey. We would love you to take a short time to complete that so we can improve and support our uplift and engagement with you. There is plenty of work going on in the Commission in other areas, particularly in the area of family violence. So thank you for all the water businesses for participating in that, and we will provide updates to that in the new year. But for now, please join me and do images and celebrations for our 3 presenters today. Thank you all very, very much. You've been fabulous. Thank you, Christy and the team, for bringing this great session together. Much appreciated.